of Selectmen meeting, which will probably be much of our agenda tonight at that meeting on this. So we look forward to hearing it. Mike?
Thank you, David. You all have a handout, warrant article status. It's changed a little bit from the one that was handed out 2 weeks ago based on discussions that we've had with selectmen and looking at the projects and budgets and everything else. So the new handout today is, you should have in front of you. As David said, it'll be discussed tonight, and there's several issues going through this, and it's actually good timing because we've talked about the consensus statement, we've talked about the plan. Now we're moving into, okay, what do we do about this over the next year? What are the priorities? Certainly priorities is the key question here. We've had a lot of discussion about everything we need to do ultimately, and right now it's, well, what can we effectively do in 2015 to move this forward, and what are the real key priority issues and questions that need to be addressed. The first page here is the wastewater warrant article status, basically just a list of what's on the large spreadsheet, and I'm going to talk primarily from the large spreadsheet. If you look at that now, we'll just go through it because it's had a couple of iterations now. We're working toward a FY15 budget of $1 million, trying to keep within that, and that's what this is gauged to. It's a challenge because there's a lot of things, as I've said, we've talked about that we want to do, and this forces us to prioritize. The first item, I have them basically broken into 3 categories. If you look at the left column, there's continued planning and engineering, there's adaptive management components, implementation of the adaptive management plan. What do we really looking to, questions are we looking to answer a year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and then finally program management. How do we manage all this and communicate it? The first category, continued planning and engineering. The first thing, treatment and disposal site investigations. And that would include basically 3 sites we have on the table. Primary one, of course, is an alternative disposal site for Tri-Town. We have good candidate sites through the Stantec contract. They've narrowed the list of 26 sites down to 7. Several of them relate to the Tri-Town discharge. We're very attracted to the Rotary site for a number of reasons. Proximity to the plant. It's outside the Namskakit.
You're talking about the Cloverleaf site?
The Cloverleaf site. What did I say?
You said Rotary.
I said, oh, I meant Cloverleaf. Yeah.
That poor Rotary, they were still trying to finish there. East Hampton.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
All opposed? Done. You can tell Sheila.
Exit 12-minute change.
I'm sorry. The Cloverleaf, and particularly the southbound or northbound Rotary when you first come off Route 6 going west into Orleans, that particular quadrant.
I apologize for my ignorance. Why, or if this has been discussed, why do we assume 3 sites just for Tri-Town? Just because of size?
No, it's not all for Tri-Town. There's one for Tri-Town disposal.
Says
there's
assume
also
3 sites required for Tri-Town discharge.
And
there's
Okay.
3 sites we're looking at.
So assume we're looking at 3 sites, not assuming we need 3 sites for discharge.
No, that's correct. That's correct.
Maybe I'm
That's a
not
good
reading
point. 3 sites required.
Only
reading the first half.
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize.
Discharge and
Thank you.
MHP treatment.
Sorry.
Yeah. We need 1 site. It could be that we need more, but we're hoping that we can get it all on 1 site. The sites we're looking at look adequate to handle the entire discharge of what we're talking about now. course, the reduced discharge makes more sites feasible at Tri-Town. And we're, as I said, focusing, or I didn't say, but we are focusing on the cloverleaf at the exchange there. There would have to be hydrogeologic studies done, environmental studies. We'd probably do loading tests over this next year. And the summer, fall of this year, actually. And a big part of it is it's owned by DOT and would be to basically negotiate and work with DOT to get that site as a site that could be used by the town for this purpose. There's some precedent for it in Provincetown, with the Provincetown system being in the median strip of Route 6. So we're hoping that that is something we can work through with DOT. And there's a variety of avenues there that we have to take to do that. We're looking at a substantial amount there. Other direct costs there would be the contractor costs for hydrogeo studies, including loading tests for 3 sites. The other 2 sites, of course, are a disposal site for the Meeting House property and a treatment site for the Meeting House property. One of the priorities for the town, in addition to wastewater, would be to look at the Hubler property for use as a parking lot. So that accomplishes both purposes, and that would be one of the primary sites we'd look at over the next year. The treatment plant site for Meeting House is going to be a challenge. We've identified a site that is not a slam dunk by any means, and going to have to keep looking there, and that'll be a continued challenge. I'm not sure on the treatment site how much will get done this year. It depends on with regard to site studies, hydrogeo studies, subsurface studies, loading tests. We want to get a site that we're sure, or at least sure is a potential site before doing that kind of work on it. So that's what we have budgeted there. Pop in with questions as we go.
So, Mike, on that alternative treatment site, are you talking about doing borings?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so it's soil foundation.
Yeah.
It's not percolation or anything. That would be at Hubler.
Both. Hubler property and the Tri-Town disposal site. We hope to get.
No, I meant I didn't mean Tri-Town. The second treatment plant site for Meeting House
Yeah, no,
Pond.
we don't need to do percolation tests there.
Okay, what would you do then?
Unless, well, it would be site acquisition. It would be looking at the sizes of the sites, the ownership, the abutters, the
Oh,
environmental
okay.
issues.
So that's relatively easy. Hubler would be.
The easy part is the geotech.
Yeah, right.
But
But you wouldn't be negotiating with the property owner or anything like that?
At Hubler?
No,
Probably not.
okay. And Hubler we own,
Yes.
so that's not an issue. DOT, is there any negotiation proposed with DOT in connection with this work?
Oh, yeah,
For the
absolutely.
exit 12 interchange?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. That's a big part of it. Including permission to go on the site to do hydrogeo studies in the right sequence of actions there. Also, I didn't point out that originally I did a FY16 budget, and Mr. Kelly, Mr. Dunford said, let's go step back and look at 16, 17, and 18. Look at a wider picture of this so we have a bigger plan, which we have done, by the way. The cost estimates that feed into the financial model have a 20-year sequence of activities from which the costs flow down each year for what we'd be doing. So that's consistent with what we're talking about here for the most part. So that was pretty easy to do for FY 17 and 18. Second item, demolition and project planning and pre-design, demonstration project planning and pre-design. We're looking at planning and permitting for 3 demo projects, demonstration projects. There's reason to put the PRB project first. It's probably the easiest to do the hydrogeotesting on, which would be required for PRBs. The siting probably, if it's on Main Street, where we're looking, would be in a public way, or possibly at the landfill. So siting-wise, it's easier in that regard. It does need to be laboratory tests based on the quality of groundwater, the soils, other things that would be done in bench scale tests in a laboratory. But that prioritizes the PRB, but also puts in place planning for 2 other demonstration projects. Facilities engineering.
What are the other 2?
That's to be determined unless SIA has it planned there. We're thinking, of course, of an aquaculture project to start with the focus on aquaculture here. And SIA, the question came up as to 3 planning and permitting would start next year for 3 demo projects. One of them would be the PRB. What would be the other 2?
Okay, I get to speak into the microphone. One of them would be a coastal habitat restoration project, and there are a couple of locations. The other would be a floating constructed wetland. No aquaculture. If we don't do aquaculture, then we do a floating constructed wetland and the coastal habitat restoration.
Okay.
And if we wanted to do an aquaculture, we could do that instead. So I think we can discuss, but I think generally shellfish project and a floating constructed wetlands project.
Shellfish being the habitat restoration.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, a lot of this depends on the siting. We'll go through for each of these categories of demonstration projects, a site screening, and say, okay, here's the requirements for this type of technology. Here's the permitting requirements, the siting requirements, the cost issues, what we need to know ahead of time in terms of doing it. We need to get baseline water quality sampling, which we'll talk about before we can start. So there'll be, before we can start construction. So there'll be a number of factors in the siting and determination of these. PRBs are a little bit easier to do there than floating constructed wetlands or coastal habitat restoration. So we think we can move the PRB project along faster. A big part of it, as we said before, was regulatory review, sign off various agencies that will be interested in those projects. Facilities engineering is a relatively modest amount to continue to look at the plant and the downtown area with regard to what the plant configuration would be, collection system would be, what of the existing systems downtown do we keep for how long, what are the age of those systems, what are the needs downtown, and how would that collection system be laid out. It is conceivable during that process that one of the existing cluster systems might be kept for 10 years or 15 years, depending upon the design of it and the maintenance of it and other factors, where it is with regard to the implementation of the downtown plan. It could be that a step steg system is appropriate for some of these facilities, or a grinder pump, depending upon elevation, stuff like that. So it's not, those aren't being excluded. It's just that those are very site-specific kind of determinations that have to be made. So this gets into more of that detail of what the collection system looks like, and also a refinement of the cost estimates there.
Mike? And we're using all the survey data that we had prepared by
Yes.
by the surveying company?
Yeah.
So all that money was is being well spent?
Yeah, they should be finished March 23rd. They still have to do the wetlands. They didn't get out there to do the wetlands before the snow fell. And so when that's gone, they'll go out there and do that. And we're going to get the drawings and files March 23rd. That was the latest estimate from them, and then we'll get the wetlands as soon as they're able to do that and add it to it. But that'll be the basis for this study.
Thank you.
Wastewater treatment plant, septic facility construction, there's nothing in the first 3 years. We're assuming at this point here that the existing Tri-Town septic facility is retained and maintained adequately to last until the new facility is online before it's demolished. That's the assumption going forward.
Mike, there's no money for collection until 18. Is that because it's assumed to be pretty simple?
Sorry,
I should have asked this earlier up at the top. There's the design of the collection system isn't mentioned until FY 2018. Is that because it's assumed to be fairly simple?
Oh, so
Based on-
2017 too, Josh,
Pre-design.
That's, yeah, pre-design.
but it's still all
That's
the process.
preliminary design versus final design,
Yes,
I
right,
assume.
yeah. This is
So you have
preliminary
several
design.
steps.
This
Okay.
isn't design. Design will go down to, you know, a 95% level of detail. We're talking probably around a 50% level of detail here.
Right.
Withdraw the question.
Good question.
Tri-Town's transition requirements, there's,
Mike,
yeah.
on the Tri-Town, if we don't do anything on Tri-Town, I thought when we asked the towns for demolition money, I thought that was originally described as demolition and kind of some level of repair, maintenance. Are we saying, I thought there was on the table the possible need to put some money into Tri-Town to keep it going through 2016. If we look to this schedule, is it possible that we'll have other maintenance costs for Tri-Town that not budgeted now?
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, it's not included in here. This 33,000 under other direct costs for item 1C, Tri-Town requirements, is the cost for the demolition design.
Right.
It's not,
Yeah, we've already approved, or each of the three towns already approved monies to maintain through December 2016.
Right.
So that's through fiscal year 16. And depending upon now, we're making these decisions on how we'll move forward. If we need more, because we extend that 2016 deadline, then we can approach that, next year as to what we
Yeah.
need. But we'll always be very mindful of that to keep it going.
and it is not included in 17 and 18, so that would have to be based on the final determination there.
That'd be something added.
Right. Regulatory coordination here, item 1E, is project-related. Fix that. Pardon me, I'm not used to using that. This is project-level regulatory coordination. There's two levels, really. One is the overall plan in terms of coordinating that with the commission and DEP, which we'll come to later. This is really project-related with regard to the PRBs, the plant, the collection system, the disposal system, the demonstration projects, what's required there. So that's what this task here, 1F, is for 2016, and it continues on 3 years. Meeting House Pond Utility Survey. The plan is to conduct that as part of the pre-design of the Meeting House Pond system, as opposed to doing it separately at this point. It's not as complicated as the downtown surveying scope would be because of the nature of the watershed, and it's such that the planning and pre-design or the planning at this stage can be done without that information, so that'll be delayed. Update of the amended CWMP. What we're envisioning here is at the end of FY16, come this time next year, we'd be taking the information accumulated and putting it into an amended CWMP for a formal submittal to DEP and the Commission and MEPA. So that's the goal of this next year, is to take what we know about the demonstration projects, the siting directions we get from the various studies, directions from the collection system, the cost estimates, other planning on the demo projects, to actually put a formal document in front of DEP for review and continuation in the process. So that's what 1H is. Regarding the adaptive management plan, water quality monitoring for MEP compliance, there's
Want to change the slide, Mike?
oh, yep. There's several levels of monitoring required. This item 2A is for MEP compliance. There's 3 items here, really. 2A is for MEP compliance. That's where are we with the compliance, and some of this is ongoing now already. Some of this is already being done. There's water quality monitoring for project baselines. If we're going to plan for 3 projects, we have to establish the baseline water quality and other things for upstream of those projects to be able to define the performance of those ultimately when they're in place. So that's what 2B is. 2C is the MEP study and report updates. And Ed Eichner was here. I see he's gone. That's particular interest to him and Brian Howes and others, because basically we're assuming that there's going to be data collected, including what's already being collected as part of the ongoing programs, to basically rerun, recalibrate, re-verify the MEP models moving forward. Mark?
Yes. In your notes there for the water quality monitoring MEP compliance,
Yeah.
it says remodeling to occur in 2019 with 3 years of data collected. I thought the MEP link model requires 5 years.
Well, I think it did originally.
It did the NOSIT, and they said they could reduce it for NOSIT to 4 years, but I thought it was...
For restudy? Brian, you have?
The baseline water quality monitoring always was 3 years.
Always 3 years.
There were some systems that, because of timing, were able to collect more than that as a baseline, but the minimum always was 3.
Okay.
Now, the other thing, too, is that there's also been monitoring going on over the last 3, 4, 5 years also. So there's a database there that, frankly, I'm not that familiar with. There's people in this room that are familiar with it, and what we're planning to do is get a work group together, including MEP staff, as well as DEP and town task force, to get together and do sort of a matrix of what's being done by whom, when, for how long, and what we need to do project baseline stuff, MEP compliance confirmation, as well as MEP remodeling. So there's really a gap analysis that needs to be done there so that we can focus this program over the next year to fill in those gaps at the right time so that the modeling can be redone when necessary. We're anticipating that it will probably be 2019, 2020 before the models are actually rerun using this information. Some of it's, most of it, a lot of it's going to be water quality, but it will also include geomorphology, hydrodynamic data, because that's critical in this as well. So basically the inlet issues that were mentioned earlier today.
Mike, can through the 208 process, we've repeatedly asked about water quality, and it feels, water monitoring, and it feels like we're kind of holding our breath. They've certainly been working on it for the last year. Would it be appropriate for us to do something to kind of meet with Paul to crystallize this issue? Because I know that people in Orleans Pond Coalition, for at least over the last 2 years, I'm sure for much longer, have been saying, we've gotten all this data, let's pull it together, let's move forward. And it feels like, this feels very much like we're still at ground zero, and I don't know what's coming out in the 208 plan, but they did say at the panel, at the One Cape Summit last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, they said they put in money for it, but they were very,
monitoring.
very vague.
For monitoring.
And yeah, it just seems to me that, you know, we're bouncing all over the place, spinning our wheels, and we should get a clearer picture on monitoring, and it doesn't seem to get any clearer.
I think that's the intent of what, that's a good point.
No,
the intent.
that's a very good point. And in fact, the budgets here are allowances. We don't have answers to those questions, really. These are allowances. And what we're going to do through this committee, this subcommittee or task force, is look at this issue, talk to the commission, see what their plans are. They have a water quality subgroup. I'm going to turn this over to Patty and Sia in a minute to comment on this. But we have to do that homework to make sure that what they're doing, what Orleans is doing, fit together. And also the funding of it is something that I've heard in the past that the commission is going to have some role in the funding of it. So, Patty, I don't know what you...
Sure. So I think I mentioned a couple meetings ago, there was an environmental bond bill that was passed by the state legislature that identifies funds for, potentially for monitoring on the Cape for nutrient issues. We are approaching the new administration about releasing those funds. And then it still remains to be seen how, who will decide and how those funds might get allocated. But certainly, to the extent that Orleans has identified projects and built up consensus for demonstration projects, that would probably weigh well in your favor, in terms of getting in line for those funds.
Other question is with regard to the MEP work. And Brian, I'll open this to you and Patty, but with regard to the MEP work, there has been changes in the systems, the impacts of which there's a lot of work being done by Provincetown Center in terms of the eelgrass, water quality work being done by groups in this room and others. How will the state and commission be supportive financially going forward with reruns of the MEP model, recalibration of that model? Most of that, I believe, was paid for. Of course, the towns did the monitoring work, but the state paid for the MEP SMAS modeling work. Is that going to be the case again, or?
It's uncertain. I mean, right now we had originally allocated a certain amount of money as the budget for the MEP for 89 systems, which later got shaved down to 70. Our current contract runs through the end of this year to finish out those 70, and beyond that, I really can't make any promises that there would be additional money for rerunning or reevaluating already or systems that have already been done.
I just note that the Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative, which is also a county entity, has from time to time provided limited financial assistance for MEP work.
Good, good.
Collaborative is coordinating a monitoring program for the South Side.
This is the kind of questions we need to put together to get the scopes and the budgets and responsibility matrix for who's going to do it, who's going to pay for it, et cetera. And that's the goal of this task force as we go forward.
So along those lines, when we asked Paul about this last week. We were particularly asked about freshwater, and the comment was that he was hoping to launch an additional effort, 208-style effort for freshwater. At the time, we suggested that people might be more amenable to launching something to do with analyzing and monitoring around freshwater. Could we consider having a separate sort of monitoring task to get started on leveraging the data that's here? Because I'm concerned that we'll be in exactly the same position a year from now, because what we're saying is maybe there'll be funding for MEP, and maybe there'll be another 208 stuff, and I'm not going to that series, by the way. But it seems to me that it's with the skills we have in the room, and in Orleans in general, that if we've got the go-ahead, we could move ahead in fairly short order to make progress on freshwater monitoring without having to wait for the state or for the county.
No, I agree, and I think there's a lot of work being done, and Carolyn and others in this room, Phil, know it much better than I do, to put that together and what's being done now. Pleasant Bay Alliance is doing quite a bit of work, that they're working with, I believe they're working with SMAST on it. I think Brian is supporting that effort, Carolyn, isn't he?
Pleasant Bay Alliance is just, I believe, contracted with Cadmus, who did the previous study, to do a second study, taking all the data through for Pleasant Bay through this last summer.
That's right. I knew about that, but isn't there an ongoing monitoring program
Yes.
that they're implementing with SMAST?
Samples
Pleasant Bay Alliance.
Yeah, the samples go to SMAST.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
Pleasant Bay Alliance and
Yeah.
the other stations for Orleans that are not through the Alliance, through the, what's the, I'm sorry, WMO stations, Carolyn? I'm completely blanking.
There are 6 stations in Town Cove and Cape Cod Bay that are not part of the Alliance, Pleasant Bay Alliance, because they're not Pleasant Bay, but they also get done, and the protocol is all basically the same, it goes to the same place.
Right. Consolidating that into a chart, and maybe even a map with call-outs or something that shows what's being done where, is one of the first things I think we need to do. And then that's the gap analysis I was talking about, is to fill the gap so that we're not repeating what we're already doing, taking maximum advantage of it, and supplementing it with, there may be hydrodynamic studies that need to be done, or tidal studies that need to be done to complement that data for the modeling rerun. So there's a variety of different shapes or components to this plan that need to be put in place.
2 years ago, we asked Brian Howes if he were to rerun the Pleasant Bay model, what would it take? He said, add X number more stations. We started that 2 summers ago, so we have 2 more years of data on that.
Good.
We could do the same thing this summer in Town Cove if somebody would give us, say, you need to do this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
And we can find the people.
And
to do it.
that's really what we're looking to do with this task force, and to get Dr. Howes involved.
If you want to start it, we need to know, like,
Yeah,
Wow.
that's, okay. Yeah, well, this is a
Put it
first,
on the list.
yeah, right. And
I
for the
can tell you
projects
it's
as
already
well.
done.
This is what we need, is that matrix of what needs to be done, where, by whom, how much is it going to cost, when does it need to be done?
We know all that.
Okay, well then, I'm going to be on your email list here as soon as we get out of here to get it, because that's really what this is to implement that such that we're only doing what we need to do. And making sure, as Mark has been pointing out, that it's statistically valid for the reasons we want it to be. We want to use the data, so. I've been hitting the wrong button here, I think, and this is not my computer, so pardon me.
Okay, just go back one. Yeah. There we go.
It has no reverse.
There's no reverse.
Sorry. Namscakett Protection Implementation Plan, as you notice here, we're going to be doing the vegetation surveys this summer on Namscakett. The other work on Namscakett is essentially being deferred until 2017. There's stormwater work being done, which is covered in the next bullet, which will cover Namscakett as well. There's, as we've all discussed, particular stormwater management issues there that will come in through the stormwater program that's being done by others through the town contracts with AMAC and Green Seal. So it's not as though nothing's going to be done there. We'll be looking at stormwater and vegetation.
Has there been any conversation or further conversation to share the costs with Brewster on the Namscakett side at a minimum?
There has. We had a conference call with Horsley Witten and Sue about 2-3 weeks ago on this, and we discussed areas of overlap there, and Sue is going to talk to powers that be in Brewster to gauge their interest in participating in that, and I'll let Sue say if there's been any progress there or interest.
To be determined.
Is it in the is there a warrant article for?
For this, not yet. It was a little late in the process to be able to put that in the warrant for May. Whether or not we have funds available in the money we have remains to be seen. We're still trying to kind of back out of what we've contracted and see what we have available.
Doesn't sound hopeful then. Doesn't sound hopeful.
Well, it could be. There's well, a lot of the money that's been given to town meeting over the by town meeting over the last few years is for specific contracts. There was a small pool of money that was given to the Water Planning Committee several years ago that's just been kind of picked at over the course of the last few years, and we're just trying to figure out exactly what's left in there because we share the money with another committee.
Yeah.
If I can also say, like that, we have tentative plans to get together with the boards of Brewster and Eastham under the Tri-Town IMA sometime in mid to later on April, I guess, which would be an update as to where we are, particularly with the Tri-Town stuff, but obviously it's all integrated, and I see Mike going through this kind of presentation, and, you know, at that point, I'm sure we can make a little bit of a more specific pitch.
Yeah.
On
Well,
the
certainly,
partnership aspect.
certainly, given where we are now with what you're saying on this year's warrants, we should be focusing then on next year. If we can do the vegetation survey, get stormwater, priority stormwater projects in Namscakett developed. We still have the sanitary survey that we talked about with regard to the bacteria. We have look at the 6A area with regard to land use, the culvert hydraulics. There was some question about whether that, the boards now, I guess, are out again. And they were in for a while, so the question is, well, how's that being managed to affect the upstream? Those are the kinds of questions that we should be pointing for 2017.
And we also have a fall town meeting.
A what?
A fall
Yeah.
town meeting.
Okay, good.
I think you need to engage Mass DOT.
Yes, yeah.
They have a huge percentage of
Yeah, I think there's contrary goals with regard to those flash boards.
No, I'm not saying flashboards, I'm talking about the stormwater that goes.
Oh, yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be
We've
done.
been having some discussions with them on the upcoming 6A resurfacing.
Yeah, and there's a reset program going on for that area as well. So those are the things that have to come together.
Can I just add on stormwater? To let people know, MassDOT has an impaired waters program that is funded particularly through an MPDES permit for MassDOT stormwater. That is a separate pool of funding for water quality issues related to their roadways.
Okay. I'll talk to you about that, Patty. I mentioned the stormwater program. A couple of consultants are working with the town to put together databases, priority projects, both quantity and quality now, and there's a small amount of money here to integrate with the work that they're doing to make sure it's coordinated with the nitrogen and water quality goals of the wastewater program. Cedar Pond, Rock Harbor Creek,
Excuse me, Mike, on the stormwater, is there another item, because we added quite a bit last year for stormwater. There's additional, not shown here, there'll be additional warrant items for stormwater?
There is existing master plan funding, and we have an annual stormwater water quality article. And Mike is aware that we need to integrate. So what you're seeing here is going to integrate into the programs the town already has in place.
Because I thought last year we added to that, to the annual program.
There was a $500,000 master plan article to look at townwide stormwater assessment and needs, and includes design and construction for improvements.
So it would probably be good if we reflected that on here, because that's going to go a long way towards showing we're working.
We've had some discussion with Mike to make sure that that does not get lost in the integration.
I originally had capital costs in here as part of this program, and they've been taken out now because we're going to link with that program with the capital budget.
Does that include nitrogen reduction?
I think the initial testing that Tom Daly is working on with several, I can't remember the firms that are
AMEC
working,
and Green Seal.
does address the nutrients that are currently in the water and what needs to be removed. And I believe that Carolyn's certainly aware of all of that. So we're trying to address the worst first, obviously on a priority basis. And I think the selectmen did get a snapshot of where the current testing and the analysis showed for the various outfalls in town, and that's what we're looking at doing.
Thank you.
The technologies I know they're looking at are nitrogen removing technologies as well, which is. Rock Harbor Creek resolution implementation. You can see there's no budget 2016 for that. Been some discussion on this as to, assuming that's resolved, assuming that the proposed plan for retaining a freshwater system there is the plan that's going forward, and that that's in place, this budget reflects no need to engage in that discussion.
And it targets the UAA analysis a little bit further out,
Yeah.
reflecting where it has to be within our development of our
Right.
plan.
And I think as this program goes forward and puts together a formal amended CWMP for submission, what we're going to do in Rock Creek will be better defined, and at that point there we'll know better what a UAA would entail, if in fact it comes together. I still think it's probably obviously a couple of 3 years away before we get to broaching that subject formally. I think ultimately it has to be dealt with.
I think it might be appropriate to approach the subject early, formally, and then address it over time.
Yeah. I'll raise that with the powers that be.
With the powers that be.
Yeah, we have it in 2017.
It's in 2017.
Yeah. Maybe the new administration will be more amenable to that, huh, Brian?
I wouldn't count on it.
Now, in program management, technical oversight and projects management is about half-time for someone to oversee that, all of the above activities. Public engagement coordination, that's, there's no budget in there right now. We've been assuming we would be having a discussion here in this group with regard to going forward. Obviously, there was a little bit of discussion with regarding the consensus statement. It's a consensus statement. It's basically in place. So the question is, what as a group and what does the town see going forward with public engagement? The plan in general has been that some level of program-wide oversight or integration or informational meeting, something like this group would be continued, but in a quarterly or semi-annual type of frequency, sort of as an update as opposed to detailed decision-making, and that there would be more project-specific work groups, roll-up-your-sleeve work groups convened for like the PRB project or aquaculture project or downtown facilities type issues, that there would be a lower level of group of engagement of people concerned and with expertise and willing to engage at that level to on the project implementation side, but not program-wide. So that's right now the plan as it's structured. Open for comment.
Mike, today is a spectacular day because an hour ago we accomplished something that we worked on for a long time. I've been through this before, and 6 months from now, 8 months from now, 9 months, whatever group is working may have a hiccup. I know you're going to be working with them, but I will tell you from a similar experience in another community, we lost the budget for the facilitator, and within about 6 months, we were back with the Board of Selectmen saying, we're at an impasse, we need to bring the facilitator back in again. So I know there are a number of ways to do this in a budget that has a lot of estimates or allowances, we'll call them. So I think, and Selectmen, we'll talk about this tonight because no matter what happens, you don't want to be in a position where the bank is empty and you know the person you need to come in and take the next step.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that tonight.
And I think the other thing about that is this, by nature, whether it's traditional or non-traditional, is an adaptive management process. And adaptive means adapting. So there's going to be change, and how we deal with that change as a community and stakeholder group is important. So that's a good discussion. Students, you want to say something?
No, Carolyn has her hand up.
Carol.
Mike, I read into the phrase public engagement as educating the public about what's going on. And I think that needs to be a part of this. And
Yeah.
I really feel this town doesn't do a good enough job. It writes
Yeah.
warrant articles, but
Yeah.
it doesn't do the PR necessary to help people understand what's
Yeah.
happening. And I really think that needs to be a strong component of this going
Yeah.
forward. This is new, different kinds of stuff that most people in this town have not a clue that we just spent 2,500 hours sitting in this room, whatever the number was, or what the product is or anything else. And we're going to have to sell it in the next 3 months, and we're going to have to continue to sell it.
Very good. You're right on, Carol. The engagement term, public engagement, is a placeholder. There's all kinds of stuff in that. There's public information, there's public education, there's public engagement, there's public direction. This group has been more in the latter. So there's various tiers of that. There's project-related and there's overall program-related. So that's worthy of discussion, and that's right.
And it needs a budget.
And it needs a budget.
It's got to have a budget.
I have to say, I think at the very least to be clear on what do we do when things aren't going well. And everybody knows that in advance, so you have a plan ready to draw on. You don't just suddenly find yourself, uh-oh, now what?
Okay. Continued financial plan development. As we'll talk in a few minutes, the financial analysis is proceeding. We've made significant progress, which we'll see, but it is going to be an evolving process. The cost estimates will get better as we go forward. They'll change significantly. We have a number of financial mechanisms, including entering the SRF program for this project this fall, getting zero-interest loans, 30-year financing. A lot of components of this need to be nailed down. the allocation of costs, the fair allocation of costs, and all of the options. You'll see, and we'll talk in a few minutes about this, it's complex. It's complex enough with a traditional technology project, never mind one when you got different types of technologies. Betterments don't apply to certain parts of town so that aren't being sewered, but yet there's costs and benefits there. So all of these issues have to be worked together as in this list going forward. Also, a big part is engineering the program to fit the town's debt limitations, existing debt commitments, and how this program fits in with that. That's part of affordability as well. There's affordability at an individual level and affordability at the town level. So I think, is that it? Oh, regulatory coordination. Again, not to be repetitive, this is the overall program coordination with DEP, Commission, NEPA, coordination with the Commission on overall compliance, continually making sure we're in the right channel with regard to nitrogen reduction and MEP compliance, coordination with the applicable DRI requirements. Some of them won't apply, some of them will apply, maybe some that we didn't think applied now will apply. So that type of integration on this as we go forward is critical. And also there's the question of the watershed management agency requirements. Will that roll out? How will it roll out? How will the town get involved in that? What will be the issues related to that? So that's the overall.
Mike, just one comment on the other side. The Cape Cod Commission, we have a requirement to report back to the Cape Cod Commission under the DRI every 2 years, and so this is the year we have to give Cape Cod Commission an update on exactly where we are.
Just keep questions. Prioritizing, we talked about 3 to 5 year plan. I talked about these things pretty much up front. Meeting tri-town decision timeframes is critical. We've been integrating that as we've gone along with the substance discussions. Staying in sync with the 208 process rollout. I think we're pretty much in sync there right now. We could get out in front of it pretty easily, which would be good. It'd be better to be a little bit further behind. But Patty will keep us straight there, right? And aligning with the DEP and state funding programs. That's absolutely critical as we'll talk about the financial. So, comments, questions? That's the plan.
Good job.
So I guess a key question for you all, knowing this isn't for you to decide on one by one, but to get a sense, are these warrant articles as outlined here consistent as you see them with the agreement that you all have? That's the key question for you.
For comparison purposes, we're calling for 992.5 for 2016. What was that number for 2015?
1,044,000, I think.
And then we upped it to 1,080,000, I think.
Jim, the capital plan had $3.5 million. We only asked for $1,045,000 or $1,080,000.
So last week, Chris Killian stood up and I thought he did a great job describing why they filed suit, what they were looking for in the suit. And he said, I want to see action, and September 15th is the date. So I guess the question I have is, given the magnitude of the work that we've already done, and we're signing, we're agreeing, let's do consensus on, let's do the pilots, let's do these things, do you think this is going to be a compelling case to DEP, EPA, and CLF? That, do you think this is, how will they react to this?
My own view is I think they'll react we're out in front on this sort of thing. I think they'll react pretty favorably on this. We've got a lot on paper. We already have, at least on paper, an approved CWMP. We've got some consensus. We've got some positive steps. We've got ongoing projects that will build on the ability to implement those steps. And I think between now and whenever it is in June, we just have to go through indicating or identifying a wastewater management agency, which I think for all practical purposes, and I'll just say this for myself, is basically going to be the Board of Selectmen, because you can't do much else within 2 months in terms of putting it together. And I think it's anticipated early on to meet that deadline across the Cape that most likely the 15 towns will nominate themselves as the wastewater management agencies for the purpose of those deadlines, and then be talking about how to restructure that over the next coming months.
So just to sort of push back, the obvious questions are, would they be expecting us to be ramping up? And also, how does the town acting as a wastewater management agency address his explicit concern about shared watersheds? I mean, he was very clear. He said, Chris Killian said, he did not think it would be acceptable if all we came to him was identify. He did not think we would succeed, to quote him, if all we did was come to him with identifying the towns as wastewater management.
Well, I appreciate that, but Chris Killian is one man. He's not running the show at this particular time.
Brian, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I'd echo that, too. Chris Killian doesn't set policy.
He doesn't set policy.
But I think in terms of the town itself and any exposure, I mean, this was a suit between CLF and EPA.
Right.
And any resolution is among or between those two parties. So it would, I think that if anything fell astray, it would reopen the suit between CLF and EPA and would not filter down either to us as DEP or to the towns, because we weren't party to the original suit. So I think the thing is keep moving along, demonstrating that you're working in good faith to address the issues in an appropriate phased manner, and I think you should be okay.
For those of us that were there to the very end of the One Cape Summit, Mr. Killian did modify his position on WTAs, stating that the model of each municipality being its own waste treatment agency, with the intent of multiple IMAs with adjoining towns to address shared watersheds, was not a model that CLF had actually contemplated, and that he found it intriguing, and he found it had more promise than towns simply standing alone.
Mr. Killian is going to be looking at 15 towns, and I think on a relative basis, we're doing reasonably well. And the question I'd ask is, what could he reasonably expect beyond this in the time frame?
Well, which may get to my question. Is there a way of compressing this and having this happen faster? I mean, is this 3-year plan a matter of A has to finish before we do B, before we do C, before we do D? Or is there a way of, instead of spreading all of this pre-work out over 3 years, this could come down to more like something like a year or two? Not from the standpoint of Mr. Killian or the EPA or the DEP, just from the standpoint of this town has shown a very strong interest in cleaning up our waters, and it's been a very long time that we've been talking about it. This feels like a very slow schedule to me.
I'll react to that. I don't think this is a slow schedule. I think given the realities of A, the affordability, what we can do at town meeting in terms of a biteable size that I think we can demonstrate is appropriate for moving forward. So something I think that is appropriate for the town in terms of the moving forward and the affordability. And, I think, importantly, that we have a plan here. We do have a specific 3-year plan that requires a certain amount of work to be done each year. And I think we have to be mindful of how much work is required to accomplish these things. I look at what our money has gone towards this year, the amount of work, the oversight, and so forth that is done, and I think realistically what we can do to manage and get done is more reflected in this. You could try to push everything ahead, but I don't think we'd be able to manage it quite very well. I think we need to do it right and correctly, and this looks at that.
Sure, I just wanted to weigh in back on the Waste Management Agency discussion. As we announced at the One Cape Summit, we are going to be holding meetings in April, May, and June, breaking the Cape into 4 sub-regions and beginning to tackle this shared watershed issue. So we anticipate those first meetings, set of 4 meetings in the first week in April. So we do intend to bring the towns together and have an open conversation about how we might address shared watersheds.
And is there anything about that that you think is inconsistent with the way ordinance is proceeding?
I do not.
Anything else on this? You feel overall, the warrants that you've heard them, consistent with the agreement that you reached, and things you feel
I'm just curious, how many articles will this be contained in?
Undecided, Josh.
And when will when sort of the print hit that?
The warrant goes to press on, I think it's April 10th, and I think we're going to be having a pretty good discussion about this tonight at our board meeting. Whether we'll get to the point of whether, we could get to the point of whether this is 1 article or 3 articles. We could get to that tonight.
I think, generally speaking for this group, it's as you see the boards progress, if you have comments, it goes to the board at this point. But I think, in particular, the concept that the boards are reflective of the agreement, I think you've heard enough here to get a sense of where that is. The comfort that you should have with that, hopefully, is high.
Seeing these 3 years, what would stand between 2018 and actual starting the projects, construction?
Starting construction? Excuse me. Let me just quickly look. I think
it'd be in 2019.
The demonstration project, I mean, technically, you could conceivably start construction on that in 2017. And maybe another one, depending upon the shellfish and floating constructed wetland. It's not unreasonable that 2 of them could start construction in 2017. Probably finish construction. Of course, you've got to get design in there. The design is a consistent issue for PRB, but 2017 is reasonable for construction of, say, at least 1 demo project. The design of the new wastewater plant would probably be end of 2018, 2019, with construction in 2020.
Got a plan.
3 years for construction?
Year and a half.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Last topic for the topic for today is an update on the financial planning.
All right. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
And we're going to jump around a little bit today. Mike and I will tag team this presentation. There's a handout that we provided with the yellow at the top. These are real numbers. So we're not just going to be speaking in hypothetical terms or guesses. We're actually using real numbers. We've run numerous scenarios or cases, as we're calling them here. And what you have before you is not etched in stone. Still a lot of moving pieces here. We're looking at different factors to come up with the most affordable rates that we can. But before we jump into that, there was a handout that was provided to you a couple weeks ago that I hope you've had a chance to look at. And
There's other copies here if you don't have it.
yeah, it's
Page one.
Is this the same one as that?
yeah, page one's called financial
Pretty much
planning
the same,
status.
except the table that was in there 2 weeks ago is taken out. It's been revised.
So, you people, if you didn't get one, I'll cover on this, right? Presentations, these are the same ones from 2 weeks ago.
So I'm going to jump back to page 4 of this handout. As we've covered a lot, the first 3 pages in previous discussions, and the time being short, and when we get into real numbers, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. So very quickly, the key variables, and this is what's really going to drive the rates going forward, the betterment versus the tax split. This will apply to those that have traditional technology, so Meeting House Pond and Tri-Town.
Town Cove.
Pardon me?
Town Cove.
Town Cove, sorry. So what portion will be funded through the betterment? What portion will be funded through the tax split? We're running various scenarios with different percentages, and it really provides you, when you change these numbers, you get a real feel for how people will be charged and how you're going to end up paying for these projects. The bond amortization period, obviously a 30-year bond with 0 interest is the best case scenario. If we look at a 30-year bond with an interest rate, that's not such a good scenario. So we're going to be looking at the benefits of a 30-year bond without any interest rate. We're going to look at a 20-year bond with a 2% interest rate, and we'll look at a 20-year bond with a 0% interest rate and see how the numbers work and see what works, what's in the best interest. Grants and or debt forgiveness, really, that's what's going to make it the most affordable. What kind of grants can we go out and obtain? Can we obtain any kind of debt forgiveness that will help lower the cost? Anything we can do to lower the capital costs and the O&M costs is going to result in lower rates and charges to the taxpayers of Orleans. Septage revenue. Septage revenue will supplement other revenues. So anything we can bring in through septage will ultimately keep the other costs down. So at this point, what I would like to do, and I don't have an overhead slide, is to have everybody go to the spreadsheet with the 7 cases going across the top with the yellow highlight. And I'm going to walk you through this very slowly. If you have any questions, if you need some clarification, please feel free to speak up. So let's start with going right across the top. We have 7 different cases that we're going to present to you. All 7 have different factors, for lack of a better term, or assumptions that impact the rate. And there's a brief description underneath each case. The next 4 or 5 lines tells you exactly what factors or assumptions those are. So the first line is a betterment. So if you follow that across, you'll see case 1 has a 0% betterment, no betterments. Case 2 has a 20% betterment, as does case 3, 4, 5, 6, through 6. And then case 7 has an 80% betterment. So if you have a 20% betterment, 80% of the capital costs is going to be paid for through property tax. The bonding years, which is the second line. 20-year note for case 1, 2, 3. Case 4, 5, and 6 is a 30-year bond. And case 7 is a 20-year bond. Now, what's the interest rate on that bond? That's the next line. Yes?
Just a question. I noticed most of these have either 20% betterment or no betterment or an 80% betterment. How did you determine the 20%? Did you look at 30%? Why wasn't maybe 30 or 40? Just because of space or what?
Well, I could run, we could run, hundreds of various scenarios. We just chose 20 as a baseline. We had to start somewhere.
You just picked 20.
So we picked 20.
You've answered my question. Thank you.
Different communities use different percentages. Some are as high as 80%, some are as low as 20. The CWMP also factored in a 20% betterment, so that was one of the other reasons that we looked at.
Sure. May I ask the selectmen, do they think 20% betterment is?
We haven't talked about that. Haven't gotten there.
Yeah. I really think to assume a certain percentage at this point is premature.
Sure.
We need to look at all the different scenarios that impact the rates.
Okay.
So, all right, so the third line would be the interest on the bonds. So case number 1 and case number 2 factor in a 2% interest rate. Cases 3 through 6 factor in no interest. That's the best news. And then case 7 is a 2% bond. And what you might be thinking is, well, case 2 and case 7 look a lot alike with the exception that the betterment tax percentage is flipped. And that's exactly correct. And what we wanted to do is have an apples-to-apples comparison that if we have the betterment at one percentage, what happens if we flip or if we go with a different percentage? So it'll really show how the betterment can impact the rate and how it not only impacts what the betterment charge will be, but what will the tax rate be. Because whatever is not paid for through betterment is going to be paid for through taxes.
Where'd you get the 2%?
2% is pretty standard Safe Drinking Water Act percentage.
Most communities are going for 3.5.
Well, if we go through
SRF.
Safe Drinking Water, it'll be 2%, worst case. We're hoping for 0. Now, case number 1, that's kind of the worst case scenario. It's either funded through taxes, or the capital is funded through tax, and the O&M is funded through user fees, with the exception of connection charges. There is a connection charge for those customers that will have the sewer running by their property and who connect to that. And then the final line, that's line number 5, is the septage revenue on a yearly basis. Cases 1 through 4 is 0, but in case 5 and case 6, we factor in $883,000 in septage revenue per year. Case number 7 has no septage revenue. Yes?
And since this agreement that we all talked about has septage in it, why isn't septage revenue part of any case that you deal with?
It will be. This was developed, This was developed, as you recall, last time before we actually agreed on the septage, if we've agreed. But I think we have.
Good job, Jeff.
But this was developed before that. In fact, it makes logical sense to use this facility to bring in the revenue, so that's the plan.
The problem is the selectmen haven't made that decision yet, Jeff. We'll be talking about it tonight, hopefully.
Another question, connection charges. What is the basis of establishing connection charges? Is that to pay for the collection system, or is it just you make up a number?
Well, the number will, for lack of a better term, we made up a number for this case, but the number will need to be determined at some point.
Connection charge is for connection.
It's for connecting to the system.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to get to, what are the criteria under which you establish how you build up the connection charge? I mean, you could say we've got 300 properties, and we've got to take care of $6 million in collection system cost plus whatever. So we're going to distribute that among the properties, or you could.
Well, I don't believe we're going to come up with a number of what we need to generate in revenue and then back into it based on the number of properties. I think it'll be based on some sort of engineering study, and there'll be a determination as to what that fee should be.
I'm just looking for what are the criteria? How do you determine what?
I thought the connection fee was the actual cost of connecting the house out to the road.
Yeah, plumbing the
So
house.
for one house, that could be $1,000, for another, it could be $10,000? I mean, it's gonna vary, depend on the house that's being connected, or business.
That's right.
But you could also have criteria that says you're going to defray some of the cost of the collection system in the connection charge. I mean, it's not just one way to do
I
it.
think that usually goes into betterments or a
Yeah,
special assessment.
that's a betterment.
That's a betterment.
The connection charge is really the cost of connecting on private property a customer to the sewer system. It will vary from place to place, depending upon distance and a lot of other factors. Sometimes they're categorized into, maybe 5 or 6 different levels of connection charge, so that everything isn't totally different. There may be a standard for all houses along a certain street that are all 30 feet away, all pay this charge.
All I'm saying is that there's another layer to this, and that's the criteria by which you pick the number.
Well, this is a placeholder. We don't know right now what a connection charge for Orleans will be. The CWMP used $5,000 per household. We're using $8,000 for a residential and $10,000 for a commercial. It could be 5 and 8. It could be 4 and 12. We won't know until we get in and actually see what the costs are going to be on a street-by-street, residence-by-residence basis.
Whatever it is for the property owner, is it paid once, all at once? Is it spread out over a period of time when you get into the higher numbers, or is that something yet to be discussed?
That will have to.
Paid all at once.
Generally, it's paid all at once, but I do believe that it should be up for discussion. If you're going to be hitting customers with a large betterment, which...
Now, you're talking about betterments now.
Well, no.
He's saying both.
Right, but if you're hitting them up for a betterment and a connection charge, we're looking at a lot of money. It's really up to the town to decide how they want to recover that connection charge. Some communities will finance it. Of course, you put a lien on the property and you finance much the same way as you do a betterment, and you collect that money over a certain period of time. Generally, it'd be much shorter time than a betterment. Or you could have a policy where the connection fee is paid up front. It's really a decision for the town.
There are some county funds that are available for Title V upgrades, and they have determined that those funds would also be available for financing sewer connections, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, there are a lot of moving pieces here, and there are a lot of, even within each line item that we're going to be discussing, there are multiple financing options that could be looked at, but we necessarily haven't taken into consideration in our projections. We're putting in whole numbers based over the 20-year life or 20-year cost of this project to come up with annual costs.
What is the current yearly septic revenue in Orleans? Does everybody know that?
A little over 2
It's-
million.
Over 2 million?
No, it's not.
No, it's a little over $1 million.
Total is about $1 million that we kick in.
Oh,
It covers,
it's right there.
it covers,
Million gallons.
that's 100%. Orleans is about 25% of that number.
just trying to relate that to the 883, 300.
Yeah, I'm not sure you're going to get that, given that you're only talking a 22,000 gallon per day discharge. We're at 45,000 gallons a day in our net revenue, maybe $1 million, $1.1 million.
I believe, if memory serves, the calculation was based on 22,000 gallons per day at 11 cents per gallon, works out to be 883,000.
The whole, because Orleans pays a lower rate, so.
I can verify that number, but it's based on a,
25% of the total volume going into the plant.
it's based on a flow and a dollar value of that flow.
This is assuming the entire existing customer base, though, including Wellfleet, Truro, Eastham. This revenue is assuming the plant serves the existing customer base, not just Orleans.
You can do that at 22,000 gallons a day? I'm not sure you can.
Well, right now, they're averaging about 25 recently.
But again, I think the issue is it's driven by the time of year. We don't
Yeah.
get the flow in the wintertime. Peak is in the summer, so I'm not
That's
sure
right.
what you took that into account, but you need to be conservative on that number. If you're limiting it to 22,000 gallons a day in the summertime, you're not going to hit those numbers.
No, that's right. This is an annual revenue, and it does assume a smaller volume of septage because we are doing some sewering, but not the CWP volume. And it assumes some reduction through just market conditions.
Yeah, but one other issue was that we only collect 250 or 260 days a year now at Tri-Town because we're closed on weekends.
They're open on Saturday, and if somebody comes in the morning, they can't offload because they have to do testing anyway. But you're right, we're not open full-fledged 6 days a week, and we're only there when the haulers.
Yeah, but my memory is that Stantec assumed open 365 days a year because the plant sewer is going to be open.
Well, that would be a different scenario.
Yeah, so that's how you back into this number.
Yeah, that's what we're assuming.
That's fine.
Yeah. Again, this is a placeholder.
I'd like to see the revenue higher, that's fine.
Oh.
You know,
Me too, right?
I don't want to over-assume.
This
because-
doesn't,
But I think
this
that's a
doesn't
reasonable
include a nitrogen.
projection. That's a reasonable projection if this is going to be open 7 days a week, which it will be.
It doesn't include a nitrogen premium either, so.
That's fine. I just,
Okay.
That's good.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Okay, so those 5 lines are the variables that are going to affect each of the different cases in some form or another. So if we go down to the next line item, total capital interest and O&M, NM, PV, that's your total capital, any interest on the debt, the operation and maintenance and monitoring at the present value cost. So for case number 1, it's $207,381,000.
So to be clear, it's not interest, it's principal and interest.
Principal
So
and
everyone's-
interest.
It's total financing cost, because some of these have no interest.
Good.
Maybe I'll change interest to,
Just financing cost.
okay.
Well, capital equals principal, doesn't it?
P&I.
Is that what's being shown there?
No, capital is the amount of money you spent building.
Which is the principal of the bond.
Okay, I'll change that to principal and interest. And that should be, that should clarify it. So for case number 1, which we're calling the baseline worst-case scenario, $207,281,000. Now, case number 2 factors in a 20% betterment, but your capital costs and your O&M is still going to be the same at the $207 million. Now, as we get out into the other cases, case number 3 has no interest on the bond. So the total cost is reduced from the $207 million down to about $183 million. The difference is your bonding interest, or your interest on the bond. Pretty significant. Now, if we go over to case number 4, you'll see that the capital is further reduced to almost $144 million.
From what?
From the $183 million.
I know, but how does that get reduced?
30-year. It's a 30-year bond.
Yeah, it's
so
a 30-year bond,
But it only reflects 20 years of payment.
but only reflects 20 years of payments.
Oh,
So you still have
gee,
to-
There's another, well, we had to, if we showed it
Yeah, let's do that. I can ignore a third of it, yeah.
of operation and maintenance expense in 30 years of bond, the numbers wouldn't be any different, or the difference would be much smaller. So there's still another 1/3 of the bond that's hanging out there that needs to be paid
Yeah.
So
after these 20 years.
So if you wanted to do total cost, in fact, the total cost of the 30-year would be much more expensive.
Would be what?
Be more expensive, because you've got 10 more years of interest to pay.
Well, but this is assuming zero interest,
Well, and
so, I mean,
10 more years of
the
bond.
cost is you're paying it 10 more years.
Correct. Case number 5 assumes everything that case number 4 assumes, with the exception of now we're factoring in septage revenue. But again, the capital costs are remaining the same at $144 million. Case number 6, the capital remains the same at $144 million. But over in case number 7, we're back up to the $207 million, and that's because we're showing the comparison to case number 2, just with an 80% betterment versus a 20% betterment.
How come case 5 and 6 are the same if there's a grant in case 6 for 25%? Just maybe I'm missing it.
Bottom line is different.
The grant is reflected
At the very
in
bottom.
different areas.
Okay.
The grant's reflected in the betterment charge
Thank you.
Thank you.
and in the net property tax.
Okay.
It's basically getting a 25% discount on what you buy.
It's down in there, okay.
Okay, so any questions on that line?
So just putting this in the context of the CWMP that we already have, and I'm mixing a little bit, but let's assume that it was, the capital cost, as I remember, was about $152 million. And it wasn't zero interest at the time, so I think that all-out cost, principal interest, would have been about 250 million, right? So if we compare the CWMP that we have now with this, where it's 250 versus 143.
Right, and I show that number down at the
Oh, yeah.
very bottom right-hand corner.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah, it was difficult to present this in a way that it's not too confusing. So if I incorporated the numbers from the CWMP, it would have been even
Yeah.
more difficult to follow.
But I think for the public, we've taken apart that CWMP and come up with a significantly different approach.
Yes.
And there is a significant cost benefit to us.
I hear what my colleagues say, but I don't think that's a fair comparison. That's apples and oranges if you're comparing 250 with the 143, because there's still a third of the bond left to pay. I mean, to
If
me,
you
the
compare it
more,
to the 143,
yeah,
yes.
the more relevant, if 250 was assuming paid off in 20 years, then
20 years at 2%.
it would be, at 2%? Then-
At 2%.
Then it's compared to the what, the 207?
It would be comparison to case number 2.
Right. So that's the apples to apples.
Okay, that's a pretty big saving, though, isn't it?
It is.
So Jeff and then Sims.
Just on a capital cost basis, if you take the 150-ish that was in the CWMP and you move it forward to today's dollars, it's about 183, 185 million. Okay, and the capital cost delta with this plan is roughly 40% less than what the CWMP was.
Yeah, okay.
roughly, give or take. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty in these numbers, so.
So just to follow on for a minute, if you go to case 6 for a minute, the change in the environmental regulation this year, for the first time, allowed the provision for a 25% forgiveness of principal.
Okay.
So if you look at case 6, the regulations and the law is in effect. It hasn't been given away yet, but there's a procedure that you can follow. So it isn't necessary that you have to go out and try and find a 25% grant. If you were lucky, you might get capital forgiveness. And that's what case 6 is.
Sure.
Not that the SRF is going to give it away all the time, but at least the regulation is there.
If you get the grant versus debt forgiveness, it would be treated the same, yes.
Sims.
Recognizing the complexity and recognizing the difficulty in assembling this table, I hope I'm not being too obtuse if I ask, could we just define customer in cost per customer? Is that per residential unit? Is it per hooked up customer?
It's an average.
Because there's going to be a distinction between, you know, what's going on downtown and what's going on in South Orleans.
That's right, and Doug will get into that in a minute. The rows down below, when you're looking at different, the effects, betterment costs, connection charges, et cetera, distinguish between those. In fact, under wherever it says Tri-Town, we will need to break that into two pieces, because the Tri-Town service area is going to be a significant percentage residential and commercial, and there's going to be differences there. We haven't broken that down yet. This is an average per hookup, you might say, right now.
Right.
It's an average per hookup, but there are going to be a substantially lower percentage of actually hooked up properties as opposed to
That's right.
residential units in town.
And Doug will get into this in a minute. As a matter of fact, we're probably time to get into it right now. If you look at total capital interest in O&M, which will change to principal and interest as we talked about, but right below that is special assessment. That special assessment is to distinguish between those, everyone will get a betterment that's hooked up. But there's a special assessment that we haven't dealt with yet, which is the value to certain commercial customers with respect to the value of a sewer system, given their age of their system, the performance of their system, the cost for replacement of that system, a variety of different details that we haven't gotten into yet. So that special assessment row will be filled in. It will reduce the capital cost for the rest of the customer base.
Can I just, Sims, though, are you asking the word where it says cost per customer at the bottom? So is the question, does that just mean the people who are hooked up, or is the cost per customer an average of everybody
average of
across the town?
It's an average of everybody.
But when it is, what I'm hearing is the fact of the implementation, that number is going to vary widely as opposed to the houses who are not hooked up, but are subject to some of the annual charges for some of the non-traditional. So some of them are going to be looking at, well, actually there is a summary. The bottom 3 lines create the summary. Some houses are only going to be subject to the non-traditional fee.
That's right.
And some houses are going to be subject to everything in the column. So that average is going to be have very wide ranges.
There will be a range, that's right.
We're looking at this on a macro level.
I
You
get
know,
it, I just wanted some clarity.
that is correct.
I
You're
think
right on.
maybe this has been introduced, but some time ago, we talked about property that was not in the non-traditional area and the Seward area, and there would be a charge there also across the board. Is that shown here? Is that what that
It is.
bottom line is? Is that what Sim was just talking about?
Well, we've factored in, for those customers that are not going to be part of the traditional technology, there will be an assessment. And it is factored into these calculations. Yes.
If you look at the,
NT.
see where it says betterment/benefit fee? The benefit fee is a placeholder for the name of it. We can call it whatever we want, but it applies to customers who aren't basically connected to sewer systems.
That's the $1,625 amount.
He was asking about people who aren't included in any of them.
Or in any of them.
Well, that's a good question, and that will get to some of the key issues at the end.
Well,
Just because if you have a PRB on Main Street, and you're downstream of that PRB, are you in the non-traditional area because the groundwater going below your property has less nitrogen in it compared to someone in the Atlantic watershed who doesn't have any NT? What I'm thinking at this point, and I think we need to have this discussion, and we will have this discussion, is that there's sewered customers and there's unsewered customers. The unsewered customer, the non-traditionals, are very, very difficult to pin down, especially like aquaculture or floating constructed wetlands to a certain property. So it's either going to be sewered or non-sewered, and the non-sewered will be reflected by a benefit fee, which is a benefit of clean water, a benefit of all the other things except the sewer.
Yeah, maintaining property value, clean water, everybody sharing in the cost of these systems, because you ultimately benefit either directly or indirectly from their establishment.
Is there another?
Well, the only point I want to make is that, of course, the flows factor into this to some extent also. Many municipalities use the term, I think it's equivalent residential unit.
That's
right. Because the flows in a residential unit might, at four-bedroom house might be 400 gallons a day, and a restaurant might have 10,000 gallons a day or 2,000 gallons a day, and a dress shop might be 50 gallons a day. So
That's right.
I think that distinction has to be made too.
It will, and that the betterment's basically
I
that's
assume
used
so.
as a factor in the betterment.
Well, I think a lot of these things, we need to rely on consultants with experience in this. And, you know, we can beat this thing to death.
Yeah.
And we're doing it now, and that's fine to discuss this, but we need to rely on our consultants.
Absolutely, yeah. The main purpose of this here really wasn't to get into the details. It was to show the sensitivity of the costs going from left to right. And it makes the point that in order to get an affordable system, in order to get one that we want to pay for, we need all of these things. We need to get the right betterment tax breakdown. This also, as Doug may not have mentioned yet, includes the tax deduction for, or the income tax reduction for taxes toward this. So we need to go, as we go across, the importance of each one of these and the relative effect of each one of these is demonstrated on the table. How it actually works out in terms of the numbers on each one of these lines in between is going to be, that's probably, we'll look at that in more detail next year, but as we get closer to design, closer to real numbers, that will start closing the uncertainty on that.
I think Doug took a very complicated formula and put it into something that we could all understand here, and I think it's very, very well done.
Thank you. Mike deserves some of that compliment as well. We've worked on this as a team. We interrupt each other's dinner all the time.
I had Doug up till 2 o'clock last night refining this, so.
So if we can just, how much time do I have, Stacy?
You have less than 10 minutes.
Wow, I get a lot of time today.
But if you finish early, no one will complain.
Any questions? I'll go quickly through this. So the betterments The betterment calculation, betterment/betterment fee, Michael elaborated on that a little bit. And each category works the same as the last one. Different variables affect different percentages. The connection charges, those are just the straight connection charges that we discussed earlier. We can lower those or we can raise them. It's really going to be determined at a later date. Now, one thing that's very important to discuss are the user fees. And you can see the user fees, and that's an annual cost, are very, very high. The reason being is the philosophy of this board was that capital would be funded through betterment and taxes, and that O&M would be funded through user rates. And that's why that number is so high. The 20-year O&M is significant, $20 million, about $80 million, little over $80 million for the entire town over the 20 years. So spread out over roughly 5,900, or spread out over the number of customers, especially for Tri-Town or Town Cove and Meeting House Pond. You've got very few customers there, a little over 300 in the downtown, and then about 340 or so in Meeting House Pond. So that's why those numbers are so high. What this tells me is we need to find a way to lower these numbers because they're too high. People will not be able to afford this. So do we want to look at offsetting some of the O&M costs through the tax rate? That'll spread the pain out. But this is just one thing to consider. And there are other options too. But it was very clear that O&M should be funded through user rates. So we wanted to give you the number as it was. Okay, next column is the net property tax. This is what the property tax charge would be to each resident. And you can see it's the same for all three areas, the Meeting House Pond, the non-traditional, and the Tri-Town. That's because you can't have a different tax rate based on the different projects. So we've blended it together and come up with what the tax contribution is. That is a net number. The number is actually higher, but we factor in a 28% credit for what you can write off on your income tax each year. That number is actually higher, but it's reduced by the tax credit, the income tax credit.
And so that's an average, like for our average house, again, a $600,000 house or something of the sort.
That is just based on the number of customers.
Just the number, so it's an average house.
An average house. And the real number would be obviously unique to each customer based on the assessed value of their property. So down below that, we have the total charge by each case. And then the very bottom line is the cost per customer system-wide average. And that's just the total cost divided by the number of customers. And the reason we put that in there is that we could compare it to the CWMP calculation. And you can see the CWMP calculation was a little over $2,500. And each one of these scenarios that we've presented doesn't even come close to that number. So it shows the true savings of this plan.
The other reason
on an average and an annual basis.
The other reason the cost per customer is to basically show the challenge, because if you look at the range in the 3 rows above that, you see, like for instance, under case number 4, you have a range from 3,700 to 589. The average, based on the number of customers in those categories, is 985. So the challenge is to now make that equitable, bring it closer together, reflecting the actual value of having a sewer, not having a sewer, having by the way, the septage revenue here goes with who pays for the Tri-Town plant. If the Tri-Town plant is paid for primarily through taxes, then the septage revenue goes to offset the operation maintenance costs of all the taxpayers. If it's paid for by the downtown users through an 80% betterment or special assessment, then the revenue would go, 80% of the revenue would go to those downtown users. That's the way it's set up right now. So getting this all to balance out to something that, again, a second consensus statement we all think is fair is the challenge over the next couple of years.
Challenge is the right word. This didn't appear overnight. I think this is version 13, if I remember correctly. And each version usually has 2 authors, so it's really more like version 26. And there's a lot of back and forth. Mike looks at it from an engineering point of view. I look at it from a financial point of view. And we bounce a lot of things off each other and spitball a lot of ideas and come up with these factors.
We need to find another reference to this plant other than Tri-Town. And
Yes.
Town Cove is not the reference, because it's not Town Cove. It's downtown, maybe, I don't know, but we're gonna get confused again about which Tri-Town we're talking about, and it's not gonna be called Tri-Town anyway.
If you tell me what you want to...
Downtown.
Can we come
I
up
think
with something?
downtown's a good suggestion, Jeff.
Downtown? Okay. I'm not going to promise I won't call it Tri-Town in the future, but feel free to correct me, and I know you will. So I'll change that to downtown.
Doug, just one question. The cost per customer there is that total annual charge, as you say, divided by the number of properties. And the total annual charge is the user fee plus the net property tax. That's correct?
That is correct.
So it doesn't include some kind of annualization of the one-time charges?
It does not include the betterment. It does not include the connection fee.
And so I'm just trying to get that, this comparison that you talked about the CWMP at $2,500. I don't remember it. Did that CWMP $2,500 number, was that just the taxes and user, or did that include connection and betterment also?
I believe it was tax and user.
So I just want to be sure it got apples and apples if we're going to be talking about comparison. Okay.
Betterment as well, but not connection.
Yes, sir.
I like the chart. I think it's very easy to read and understand. The only thing I'm having a hard time understanding is why the annual septage revenue isn't really spread out across the board, because it's going to be there. So
It will be.
Yeah,
It will be.
but it would change the numbers of a lot
When
of
we
the
did
numbers.
this, we were doing it in part, one of the reasons was to show the benefit of the septage. So if you go from case 4 to case 5, you can see the relative benefit of it. But as we go forward, I'm presuming, we'll assume that septage revenue is there.
Well, I'm looking at case 2 and 3, those are the ones that should,
Yeah.
and 4 should have it in there. One, forget about 1.
Yeah, we'll add that. But what you don't see is that there's a pretty complicated worksheet that this worksheet pulls from. And I have the costs broken down by the downtown plant and the capital costs and what the betterment impact would be, and if there's a grant, what that impact would be. And I do the same for the O&M. And I break down what the tax impact will be and what the user charge will be. And then I do that for the meeting house pond, and then I do it for the non-traditional technology. Below that, I have a revenue proof that shows that the money we're generating up top balances out with what the costs are. So we could probably get into that at some point in the future to show you the level of detail, but probably not for another meeting or two until we start to tighten this one up.
So are we okay to stop here for today?
I'm okay if you're okay.
We're okay. The last 2 pages, 7 and 8, we've talked about a lot of them. We won't go through them here, but they list prospective issues and challenges that need to be dealt with, and they're very important. So we'll cover those in future meetings as we go forward, one at a time probably, but
take a look at those and be subject to future meetings.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
It is complicated.
So I know I said I'd come back to outreach, but I just want to confirm that our next step on outreach is that I'm going to come up with some draft text for these different newspaper outreach that clarify what it is the group decided in maybe more true or direct language. We'll draft up some language that might go into a flyer. We'll work on the language for the map and the images for the map. We'll get everything out to you guys in draft, and we'll need to hear from you in a pretty quick turnaround, your comments, so that we can then adapt and try and get agreement on something that people feel can go into the future.
Good.
One consideration of that is that the Cape Cod Times and the Cape Codder have different rules about how many words, et cetera.
We're on that. We're paying attention. We got half page on one end, and we've got 600 words on the other, so they might not be identical. Yeah.
When we talked about the 2 or 3 or whatever number of panel presentations, David jumped in and said, I don't think we need that. I think we need it. At least we should keep that in reserve, because one public information meeting with the Citizens Forum, that's at 3:30 in the afternoon. We have not addressed those who work full-time. So an evening meeting, perhaps that first week in May before town meeting, to at least explain and define terms and so forth. I'd like to suggest that we keep that an open option, talk about it next time.
Okay. And given timing, because I don't think we're scheduled for another meeting until April 15th?
15.
April
15.
April 15th. So, Doug, why don't we look into Snow Library's availability that week, see if we can get something held for a weeknight. Is that the?
Might have to look at something other than the library. I think.
Something other than the library.
And I was thinking that first week in May, is that what
Right,
you're
that first week of May. But I'm just thinking, if we don't talk until April 15th, it might not be available first week of May
We'd
by
like to
then.
look into that.
So why don't we do a little, we'll do a little looking into that, see if there's space we can hold for that week for an evening session, in case you guys decide at that next meeting. That's
Also
the-
brings in,
The
I think,
Episcopal Church is often a good place to use. They have a nice facility, and for a nominal fee, they'll rent their space.
also brings in, I think, the younger population that's raising families that are working full-time, maybe both working. It gives them that opportunity. So I'd like to keep it.
Okay. Any comments from the public? Yes, Fran.
One other consideration for a venue would be the middle school auditorium is large. And even though it certainly may not be filled up, at least the invitation is there that we're expecting a large group and please come. So just another suggestion.
Any other?
So I would echo the compliments that are offered to this group, but with a caution. When you meet for 2,500 hours, you develop a vocabulary that you understand. And it's not simply the simplify the sentences. It's the translated to the voters that's critical. And as somebody who sits on the outside of this, I just have to tell you, I haven't put in 2,500 hours, but I've put in 50 hours, and I still don't know what adaptive management is. Okay? So this has to, I mean, I understand it. What has to happen next is that a warrant has to pass at the town meeting. And if the warrant doesn't pass at the town meeting, I don't know where we are. And so to up the odds of the warrant passing, all of this has to be so brought down to, I don't know, to 5 key points, 6 key points, what we're doing at the meeting house, what we're doing vis-a-vis Cove, what we're doing at Tri-Town, how we're protecting the waters, and how much it's going to cost. So I don't know how you do that. It's a fantastic work that's been accomplished here, but this mostly serves us. It doesn't tell us yet how we're gonna get to the next step, which is passing the warrant. Just a caution, if you've lost track of that reality. Good point.
Any other, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest in this bottom line in yellow line on this report. Is this numbers available to be put out to the public? And if so,
It says for discussion only. Only for the discussion in this group, to put in perspective where we are.
okay, so just then, I mean, you're always asking us to go back to our constituency and give them a status report. What, how should we address this? Just that we're starting to refine?
Well, I would say that, if you look at the whole range on the bottom, it gives you a perspective of what we're talking about from worst to best. And what the key issues are up top is zero interest loan, amortization period, septage revenue,
25%.
25% grant. Those are the key takeaways. This could be affordable or it could be unaffordable, depending upon success in putting together that financial package.
Right, and as we've been saying on the Finance Committee from the beginning, going out and trumpeting a headline number is, this is a 20-year number that is very complicated and will be revised significantly through a lot of extra work. The chart is a little bit difficult for a layperson to read because it's got a 20-year fully loaded number, and it's got some one-off charges, and then it's got some annual charges. So if you went and handed that out, it would raise an enormous number of questions that we still need to answer internally before we're ready to communicate them with the kind of confidence that we need to be communicating. So going out and saying it's either going to cost 207 or 143 million is the wrong thing to do right now.
So in that light of that, if you'd all hand your sheets down.
Or Ethan. I'll give you my that's it.
I think we're all set. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. All right, good job, gang.